Hi there, I'm Suzanne and I'm a calligrapher, and this is a short video tutorial on filling your nibs. The problem with filling your nib by dipping straight into your ink bottle is that often you don't know where the surface of the ink actually is, so it's easy to plunge your nib in too far and overfill it, and at the same time get ink inside your nib holder. And if that happens, then you're likely to get ink leaking out onto your fingers and into the nib and everywhere for the next several days, or at least until it dries out. One solution to overfilling your nib is to transfer your ink into a smaller container, like this one, where you know exactly how far your nib is going into the ink well, and you can see you're not overfilling it. There you can see a bit of ink just in the side there. Another solution to the problem is to fill your nib using a dropper or a pipette and just taking the ink and putting it in the side of the nib between the reservoir and the nib itself, and you can see it's filled up nicely there. It's not overfilled, and you also don't have any ink resting on the top of the nib. Often when you overfill a nib, you end up with a lot of ink on the top of the nib. And then when you put it down on the paper, what will happen is the ink from the top of the nib will transfer onto the paper in a big blob, and you really don't want that to happen. Don't forget to stop and clean your nib every couple of lines. If you don't, what happens is you'll get a buildup of ink on the back of the nib, or on the top if you want to call it that. And sometimes if you don't clean it, the ink will actually evaporate and cause crusting between the tines, and so the tines will separate and you won't get good ink flow. It will tend to flood down and fill your page and make a blob, and that's no fun to deal with. Now something I'd like to show you is how to mix up gouache. And gouache is, short story, it's opaque watercolor. And what you do is squeeze some out of the tube into a shallow dish, depending on how much you want to use, and then add water to it. So it's about the consistency of cream. What I've done is use my bristle brush to stir up the gouache, and you can see a little bit of glitter there on the surface, and that's because my brush wasn't clean when I started. Now, I was taught this technique by calligrapher Marcia Brady from California years ago, and it's served me really well since. So you have a nice solution of gouache there, and you take the brush in your left hand, if you're right-handed, and put the nib in your right hand, and then just take the brush and wipe it across the back of the nib. And then you can just put pen to paper, and away you go. Now the thing that this bristle brush does is when you wipe it across the back of the nib, as well as filling it, it stirs up the gouache that's inside the nib. And especially if it's a hot day and you're lettering, the gouache is going to dry out because the water's constantly evaporating. If it's really hot, you'll notice you have to add water to the gouache fairly frequently to keep it the right consistency. And again, wipe it across the back of the nib. Put your pen to paper. There you have it. Hope that helps.